Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then hi! Today I'm going to be painting Elisabeth's story. Well, the end of her story. And I'm going to be using watercolours. Also, you will see a couple of cats in here, because for some reason, as soon as I get paints out, they want to sit on me or what I'm doing. So, try and ignore them. I know it's hard. I've tried. They just won't leave me alone. Little monkeys. So, let's begin with the story. I'll let you watch me faff about with some watercolours, just some cheap ones, and I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. The cottage sat a little back from the lane, as if it preferred not to be noticed. Its thatched roof dipped in the middle like a tired hat. A low stone circle wall wrapped around it, patched with moss and thyme, and at the front a small wrought iron gate complained with a familiar squeak each time it opened. Beyond it, a pebble path wound through a garden that refused to behave. Wildflowers tangled with nettles, daisies elbowed aside thistles, and foxgloves stood proudly beside what others called weeds. Elisabeth Poulter called them all by name. Weeds have feelings too, she would say, brushing her fingers across their leaves as she passed. Inside the cottage it breathed warmth. Clothes hung on a line near the fire, gentle steaming. A loaf sat under tea cloths, quietly rising. A pot of tea murmured on the skillet, and in the far corner a large cauldron bubbled with a slow, patient rhythm, like a second heartbeat in the room. Elisabeth was in her 30s then, pretty in the way that made people look twice, but sharp-eyed enough that no one mistook her for soft. She did not suffer fools, and the village had long decided that this was reason enough not to like her. They called her strange. She called herself practical. She was what her mother had taught her to be, a white witch, a woman who understood plants, poultices, teas, salves, tonics, a woman who knew how to ease a fever, calm a mind, mend a stomach, and bring sleep to those who had forgotten how. But Elisabeth had also known heartbreak, the sort that sits behind the ribs and refuses to leave. He had been from the village, kind, curious, foolishly brave. He had walked through her squeaky gate one evening with mud on his boots and laughter in his voice, unafraid of what others whispered, for a while. Elisabeth had believed the world might soften for her. It did not. The whispers grew louder, the looks harder, and one day he stopped coming. She never learned whether it was fear, family, or cowardice that kept him away, only that it did. That winter, Elisabeth began writing her journal. Not a spell book exactly. A record, a memory, a passing down. Each page held a recipe, a potion, a tea, a mixture, but beneath the ingredients were stories, why it was made, who it helped, what it cost. She wrote for the child she already had, a small son who slept upstairs under a patchwork quilt, and for the ones she would never meet. She wanted them to know that knowledge did not come from books alone, but from living. And sometimes from hurting. A love potion, not the silly kind whispered about in markets, not to force affection or bend a will. She told herself it was only to soften her heart, to remind a man of what he had once felt, to bring back what fear had stolen. Rose hips for memory, lavender for calm, honey for sweetness, a shaving of apple for truth, and without thinking, a strand of her own hair. A foolish addition, a personal one. The potion shimmered an unusual colour, not quite gold, not quite red. It hummed faintly as it cooled. A sound she felt more than heard. Elisabeth hesitated. Every instinct told her this was not like her other work, but hurt as a way of silencing wisdom. She sent it, wrapped carefully in cloth, with a note he would understand. By morning, he was dead. They said his heart had stopped in the night. No struggle, no noise, just stillness. And when they found the small bottle beside his bed, the village did not need long to decide who was to blame. They did not come to her cottage for medicine that day. They came with rope. Elisabeth stood in her doorway, her son crying somewhere behind her, her mother gripping the back of a chair so hard her knuckles shone white. She did not beg. She did not deny it. Because somewhere in her chest she knew the truth was worse than anything they could accuse her of. She had meant to mend love, and instead she'd killed it. They gave her the ending witches were given in those days. Public, cruel. The village watched, some with fear, some with satisfaction, and some with relief. Her mother took the journal before they left and hid it in a little chest under the floorboards, wrapped in cloth that smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. And life went on, as it always does. Her son grew. Her name became a warning, then a story, then a half-forgotten rumour. The cottage sagged, the gate rusted, the garden returned to itself. But the journal waited. Years passed and the village forgot the exact date of Elisabeth Poulter's death. But they never forgot his. He had died on Valentine's Day. A fact the older folk repeated with a shake of the head, as if love itself had been cursed that winter. They buried him at the edge of the churchyard, where the ground dipped slightly and the yew trees leaned close together, as though they wished to listen. His grave was plain. No grand stone, no angel, just a name and a date, and a patch of earth that never seemed to keep flowers for long. Except for one night of the year, on All Hallows Eve, when the veil thinned and the world itself breathed between one heartbeat and the next. Something in the churchyard changed. A headstone would appear, with the words, R.I.P. my love, and a heart with a single letter E. The air would grow colder than anywhere else. Dogs refused to pass the lich gate. The mist gathered low and thick, clinging to the grass like memory. And just past midnight, when the moon was high and silver as spilled milk, she came back, not as the villagers had imagined her in their stories. Not waiting, not twisted, not monstrous. Elizabeth returned as she had been, red hair falling down her back, long skirts brushing the frost-tipped grass, quiet, purposeful, sorrowful. She did not walk through the gate, she simply appeared beside the grave, as though she had stepped out from between moments. Rather than miles. In her hand she carried a single red rose, not fresh with dew, not withered by time, perfect, as though plucked from a garden that no longer belonged to the living world. She would kneel there, the same way she had once knelt beside her cauldron, the same way she had knelt beside her son's bed, the same way she had knelt in the dirt of her unruly garden. Naming weeds like friends, and she would place the rose on the headstone. No words were spoken, no weeping heard, only the soft rustle of skirts and the faint sigh of wind through the yew branches that had witnessed centuries of grief. Sometimes a raven would sit upon the headstone beside her, silent, watching as though keeping vigil with her. But by morning, she was gone. But the rose remained, bright, impossible, beaded with frost but never frozen. The first time it happened, the villagers thought it was a prank. The second time, merely coincidence. But by the third year, no one dare touched it. They began to leave the grave alone. Children were warned not to wander near it on that night. Lovers avoided walking past the churchyard on Valentine's Day, uneasy at the thought of a love that had ended so completely, yet refused to rest. Because the truth whispered now, only in low voices, by firelight, was this: Elizabeth did not return out of anger. she returned out of penance and love. A love that had never been meant to harm. A love that had been foolish, desperate, human. A love that had made one terrible mistake and had been forced to carry it beyond death itself. Some say if you stand very still in the churchyard on All Hallows Eve, you can hear her murmur apologies that the wind carries away before they reach the living. Some say the rose does not come from this world at all, but from the overgrown garden of a cottage that no longer stands, where wildflowers still tangle with nettles, and foxgloves still stand proudly beside weeds that have long since forgotten they were never unwanted. And beneath the floorboards of that fallen cottage, wrapped in lavender-scented cloth, in an old chest, a journal still waits, waiting for hands gentle enough to understand that magic like love is not always wicked. But it is always powerful, and sometimes it costs more than a heart can bear. I hope you liked that story. It kind of tells you a little bit more about Elisabeth, how she became broken and her love no longer wanted her through fear of other people's thoughts. And I just think that sometimes we all get a bit of that people don't want to be near you because they're afraid of what you say, of what you do. And it shouldn't be that way. If your heart belongs to somebody, then it belongs to somebody, no matter what other people think. All Elisabeth did was try to be kind. Because she was slightly different, didn't always say the right thing, people looked down their nose at her, feared her, didn't want to be around her. Instead of actually getting to know her and to see how kind she was, they would have realised that they were just the same as her. But instead, they let their fear take over. They cowered. They bullied. They were mean. They let fear control their lives to the point where it made them nasty people. Elisabeth lost her life through a mistake. A silly mistake. And I think that's a very good moral. That maybe we should get to know people before we start judging, calling, accusing. You never know what's going to happen. You never know how you're going to internalise stuff and put that out into the world. So yeah, it's a thought to ponder on. Always think before you react. Try to see both sides of a story. And if you get a whiff of something not right, stay away from it. So, if you liked it, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and I will be carrying on with Elisabeth and Lizzie's story. I promise. I got a little sidetracked. And I would like to say thank you to my members. You are all awesome souls. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to all my new subscribers and my old ones. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye!